Now, let's see how cybersecurity works. It's all about securing a computer, and there are various methodologies, there are various factors that come in on how you're going to secure various aspects of the same computer. We start off by authentication mechanisms. What is authentication? Authentication is the part where you're going to identify a person, authorize that person for some access controls, and authenticate that person to ensure that the person is the same person who they claim to be. So here you start off with a username and you associate a password with it. The username is used to identify the account that the person wishes to access. The password is the authentication mechanism to prove that the person is who they are. Now here you may want to enhance the authentication mechanism by using a two-way authentication mechanism. For example, with banks, when you type in the username and password, they send an OTP or a one-time password, which is auto-generated by a server and sent to a registered device that the person owns. For example, a cell phone. So that's one added layer of security where you're not only relying on the password, which can be cracked, but you're relying on a third-party device as well, which the person needs to have physical access to, where they're going to receive the OTP and then they're going to input it. Every time they try to log in, a new OTP will be generated. Securing your passwords. Just having a password may not be sufficient. You have to ensure that the password meets some complexity standards to ensure that the security of those passwords or the complexity of that passwords is high enough where cracking programs will not be able to easily crack the password. Regular updates. All the operating systems or the applications that you use will be receiving regular updates. Could be for functionality, but more for security. So as new vulnerabilities in applications or operating systems are found out, the software vendors or the developers of those softwares over a period of time start sending out these updates, also called patches, to the end users. It is very important for the end users to identify these security patches and install them on their devices as soon as possible. Else, they remain open for those vulnerabilities, and unpatched systems thus can easily be hacked. Usage of an antivirus. To protect yourself from viruses, worms, trojans, essentially malwares, there needs to be a software that's installed on your computer that is going to watch out for them. You cannot rely on the operating system itself to protect you, so there has to be an antivirus which will be scanning the connections that you're making, the websites that you will be visiting, the files that are getting executed in the background, and ensure that everything that is happening is legit. Installing a firewall on a system or a server. A firewall essentially is a software or a hardware that allows or disallows some functionality. For example, a port to be opened or closed, or a service to function on a computer or not function on a computer. Thus, what you're trying to do here by disabling unwanted services is you're limiting the threat landscape that you're creating for your computer. If a service doesn't exist on your computer, it cannot be hacked. So the essence here is first identify which ports you'll be using, which services you will be using, and then create a policy on the firewall to ensure that only required ports and services are running. No phishing. So phishing, as we said, could be a malicious website that is hosted by a hacker. The hacker sending you a fake mail looking like a genuine email, asking you to connect to that particular server and fooling you into you giving that confidential information to the hacker. So you should either the antivirus or an addition to that would have an anti-phishing toolbar which would identify the websites that you're visiting and give you the risk rating of that website, giving you an idea whether this website was ever reported as a phishing website or not. Cryptography, encryption. The best way to keep everything secure is to encrypt it. However, what kind of encryptions are required, what should be encrypted, what should not be encrypted, how that encryption should function, and how this encryption enhances the business value is what we need to ascertain. So, the knowledge here that will be required is what protocols you want to encrypt. For that, you first need to identify which protocols you're going to consume, what data is going to be transmitted over that protocol, how valuable that data is to your organization, and then you're going to add encryption or cryptography on top of it to prevent any attacks from hackers. And then securing DNS servers. DNS is a domain name server, which is basically an index that maps your domain names to your IP addresses. So the domain name system is an index that maps your domain names to your IP addresses. Now on the internet, computers do not know domain names. They can only identify IP addresses and MAC addresses. So when we type in, let's say, google.com on our browser, the computer doesn't know what google.com is. What it does is it sends the packet to the DNS server, and in the DNS server it queries where google.com is located. It is given the corresponding IP address, because of which the packet then goes to the relevant server. There are attacks where a DNS can be compromised and the pointer pointing to your particular website can be changed to point to a malicious server that a hacker is hosting. So to prevent that from happening, you need to secure your DNS servers. So with these kind of attacks and the kind of defense mechanisms we have seen, let's see how do we become a cybersecurity expert. So essentially, who is a cybersecurity expert? A cybersecurity expert is an individual employed by an organization to protect their infrastructure, right? So this person is responsible to identify potential flaws, identify what threats the organization faces, and then streamline or create or design or architect methodology which is going to protect all the assets that the organization has. So this is going to happen through a variety of techniques, such as finding weaknesses, so vulnerability management, where you run vulnerability scanners, identify potential flaws in the organization's infrastructure. Could be applications, could be servers, could be desktops, could be operating systems, could be anything, could be network-based flaws as well. And then you're going to monitor these systems. You're going to look at the data flow that is going to the internet, through the network, through the intranet rather, and then you're going to check if there is anything malicious going on in that network. So over these techniques, you're basically going to monitor it on a day-to-day basis, on a regular basis, and you're going to try to identify if anything out of the ordinary is happening, right? After you find the weakness, you're going to test those weaknesses to identify the complexity of those weaknesses, to validate those weaknesses actually exist, and then you're going to repair them, you're going to patch them, you're going to install updates, or you're going to you're going to install mechanisms like firewalls or antiviruses to mitigate those weaknesses, and you're going thus resulting in strengthening the areas where an attack may have occurred.